counters chart, definitely.
I would
Maybe
just
in the
put
next
it next
line.
to it. Put skip counting connected to hundreds chart in cubes. And then where would you want to move after skip counting is the next thing. So you're already starting to introduce growing. Do we want to move to charts or do you want to move to actual growing patterns?
I would say growing
I think
patterns
the
first.
patterns would be better. than
That would be
doing
the question you want to ask, because if you're saying investigation is making a huge jump, then we can add other pieces in before the whole tables and charts.
Yeah, because they have to know what it is in order to apply it to a
the-
table.
Yeah.
Growing, 3, 6, 9. I moved to the 3 one, it's growing.
Yeah, it's a growing, but it's still, the chart's just so hard. I think if they need more manipulatives, or is that quote in that book that I really like?
So, I mean, that's the thought that you guys need to decide, where do you want to go to next? Do you want to go to growing using manipulatives or growing using a chart?
Manipulatives.
Well,
Yeah, I
think-
agree.
I mean, and if you look at our Rita Candu's, those concrete objects is like a level 1 skill. So if we want to get everybody on the same page, you know, it's better to use the concrete before we go into the
And Debbie, yeah.
numbers. Just like the Debbie Dillard.
And Debbie Dillard saying, if they have the opportunity to work with the counters or visual models that show the patterns, before they look for patterns and facts written in vertical form, it's easier to see them and construct that generalization. So they really need to see the concrete, the visual stuff before they can do it. So they need a lot of that modeling with the cubes before we move into the abstract tables and floors and missing things.
Isn't that what we have, those skip counting with the cubes and the 100 charts? Isn't that,
But then after that, then what do we do?
we're using the manipulatives,
Right.
which is the cubes, and then the 100 charts. So then
What's
that's,
next?
But I think but then that
That could
growing
be
patterns
equations.
is growing patterns would be both the increasing patterns and decreasing patterns too. We have to figure out
well,
when we're gonna
since
do
we're
that.
doing the skip counting, that's showing them and then maybe extending a growing pattern. That's what they have next year, after they recognizing it, being able to extend a growing pattern.
So this one, so here, change that to extending a growing pattern? Yes, no?
Yes.
Okay.
That's just a suggestion.
Yeah.
Growing patterns.
Yeah.
So it should be-
And then like you said, where we put that.
But we also have
So
to
you
show
just
that
give it, and then they have to.
patterns, we have to show that the growing patterns decrease and increase.
Put that next.
Yeah.
So it's by 2.
Or next to extending growing patterns.
And then decreasing patterns, growing patterns too?
Maybe
Yeah,
first
they're
just
called growing
recognize the increasing and decreasing before they extend it. I think, so that they see what it is.
Now, how would you guys want to do that with manipulatives and pictures and numbers?
Everything goes with.
Then I think we should put that next to it in parentheses so we remember.
Do we want to show them numbers and pictures and the manipulatives for all of these all at once? Or are we going to wait to do numbers like later? What do you
should
guys
all at
think?
once.
All at once, okay.
Using manipulatives, right?
Pictures with
And
growing
numbers.
patterns.
And numbers.
Well, growing.
Pictures would be-
And then,
So it would be like 1 rabbit, 2
Like
dogs,
what-
1 rabbit,
Oh,
3
it's all-
dogs.
oh,
Like what
I
Anna Maria was
I
showing.
just
Yeah.
remembered.
And I have like some, like, because we're talking about the various manifestations, so they're looking at it in numbers, they're looking at it in visuals and concrete objects, and then, you know, I had talked about in the last meeting about like those language arts connections. So, when we're ready for that, we can talk about, I have some examples, some texts that they're familiar with, that you can clearly see the growing patterns or the increasing. So,
We want to think about that,
Yeah,
I go
yeah,
back to the
later,
skip
now or
counting.
later?
Maybe connecting it in the concept sequence
So-
after extending, maybe before extending growing patterns?
What?
Connecting to
Show
literature?
us what you're talking about.
To the literature. Can I show one now?
Oh,
or-
yeah.
Okay, so then what I thought of is we could take it into language arts or start off with one, but there's a book, for example, a lot of them know there was an old lady who swallowed a fly. So then this would be a repeating pattern. So So there was an old lady that swallowed a fly, there was an old lady that swallowed a spider, you know, so through the text, as you're reading it and you're building the chart, they can see that this is a repeating text, and they could orally also say it with you, so you could link to that, because it's taking it in different ways, you know, so I think that
Sorry, I was gonna say, there's a really good ESL game that I've played many times with kids, like I would start with, I have an apple. Then Beth would have to say, I have an apple, and then I have a baseball.
Oh, yeah.
And then she has to say, I
Going
have an
on a
apple, a
picnic.
baseball, and a cat, and
I'm gonna bring-
keep adding. The last person always has the hardest one.
Yeah.
They have to do them all, so that's another oral repeating growing pattern too.
And I just have one other, I mean, there's so many texts, like there's a runaway gingerbread man, but this is one that we got in at the library, it's called it's by Mo Willems, and it's like, that is not a good idea. And you know this book, right? Wouldn't it be perfect?
It's a cute book.
So that it's about this wolf, and he's trying to get, or, you know, there's a bunch, it's kind of hard to put it concisely, but he's inviting this duck to go for a stroll, you know, and then these baby chicks say to him, you know, he asks him would you like to go for a stroll? And then they say, sure, that is not a good idea, one of the chicks say. And then it goes on, like he asks him to go for a stroll in the woods, he asks him to go to his kitchen, you know, so you have all of that. So I just created something to tie in with that text that you could kind of see with the kids if they're orally saying it. You know, the first part is, that is not a good idea to the kids. And then the next page when it says, that is really not a good idea to go into the deep dark woods. You know, that is really, really not a good idea to go into the kitchen, you know. That is really, really, really not a good idea to help make the soup, you know. And then that is really, really, really not a good idea to, you know, go in the pot or something like that. And then it has a surprise ending. But I just thought as it unravels, you can see that growing pattern, which is why I made the really, really. And I put it in the resources folder as a PowerPoint so that you could, if you just wanted to use it on the smartboard as you're reading. It's just another manifestation that we could tie into our language arts.
How about if we put at the top, just all the way at the top, integrate literature as many ways as we can. So that we're constantly keeping that in mind.
Oh, shoot.
And so, Anna Maria, I heard you say two different things, the growing, or the pattern of the text, but also earlier you had talked about making predictions. Making predictions and patterns related to math, making predictions and patterns relating to literature.
Exactly.
All right.
So where would we like to go next?
I would say, yeah, no, you talk about it, you pull it out.
Um,
Math connects numeric patterns.
Right, I like how this sets up better than, I mean, maybe we can do a combination with the math, what is this again? Investigations, but on page 87, they're talking about numerical patterns, and then it goes into extending the numerical patterns, but I like how they have some nice sentence stems, and they're connecting the manipulatives with applying it into a pattern, but the way they set it up is nice. So they're using it, they're seeing it visually, and then, but they're also connecting it with the patterns. But I like how it's set up more so than the house and the levels.
This is a chart that they'll see.
It's a chart,
The
it's a chart.
You're talking about page 87.
Because it says, you know, they're given a chart and it says, how are the numbers changing? And then your answer would be by tens. And then number pattern is counting on by tens.
It's almost like this is a step for that.
Yeah.
So it would be that first and then this,
Yes.
because you have to keep in mind that's how
Right,
it's on the 10.
right.
Yeah.
So I think this is,
But
this is more.
this is building that piece
Building
when we
around.
were talking about, well, what is the 10th spot?
Yes.
Right.
This page is kind of building that because they're figuring out what the rule
What the
is
rule is.
first.
The
So
unit.
the rule is it's counting by 10.
Yeah,
And then the 10th spot would be 10
Right.
more.
yeah.
Right.
after that.
So it's, yeah, it's page
makes sense.
87.
87 through 90.
That's really going to be when we start actually framing and putting it in, to remember that too.
Okay.
So numeric patterns using charts, or?
Ooh. Or the 10th one would be-
One thing I just want to, just to keep in our minds, going back to geometric patterns for a minute, going back to the standards where it talks about that in geometric patterns, students must often recognize transformations of a figure.
Oh, that they
And
move,
so that they move
that's
in order to be able
that
to,
was-
that's a higher level
thinking,
spatial
right?
There.
awareness.
And
To
there-
be able to recognize the pattern, knowing that the geometric figures may have rotated around a particular vertex.
Oh, boy.
Is also part of the standard, so we need to make sure that we are incorporating that.
Yeah,
That is a higher order thinking skill.
Here's, this one says,
That's,
Anna Maria's materials will be helpful in that respect, if you could have the kids act them out, holding the them in different positions.
Yeah.
You go to try,
Yep.
go to page 92, it's a nice
think
problem.
of that.
There are the problems.
Forgotten.
That's true.
Second thinking, open deliberation, 7 beats. At a high, 2 stars, and it goes.
I just threw it there. Y'all can change it, but it's just, so I wouldn't forget.
And then I guess the last part would be them creating their own patterns.
Creating this own, creating or repeating pattern?
Creating both. They
Yeah.
have to be able to create both.
Yep. We have, oh,
Well, no, it'd be at the very bottom,
Yeah, that's what I
at the
thought.
very end of the sequence.
create both.
Well, I could see what Sonia was saying. She was
Yeah.
saying put creating, repeating patterns there.
Right.
And then after we're done growing, creating growing patterns. And then maybe the next step would be creating, repeating,
Right.
and growing. Was that where you were going with that?
That's exactly
Sonia?
where I was going.
And also being able to identify the
The
difference
difference.
between the two. We've got to be specific about that instruction.
Create repeating patterns.
I think those sentence frames are gonna really be helpful because I often find they're like lacking the words, you know, so we already developed some.
And that's what happened on this test that we just, we're doing now, where they're asked to circle one, the question that had the triangle and this rectangle, and they're to choose one and tell some things they know about it. So now they have to go writing. They had to, it was a struggle today, having them to write those
Right.
sentences, because it says, write sentences that you know about this shape. And the other one, how do you know that a shape is symmetrical? They had to write a sentence
Yeah.
to tell, so it moved from just
And
numbers.
we were hoping that our sentence stems helped with that to at least give them something to springboard off of that.
Right.
It reminds me of the graphs, with our horizontal and our
Yeah.
vertical graphs, and how we've had all these problems with the graph. The same thing is always that comparing between the two things.
That is part of the standard. They should be able to describe it also. So
Yes, talk about.
they
so with the
should,
geometry, should we also integrate, as a reminder, but integrate geometry?
Oh, I did it.
Draw-
Geometric shape
figures, okay.
transformation, right there, repeating patterns using geometric shape transformations.
I think that's something we need to spend, as you said, talking about it, because that's what happened on, I go back to telling why the shape is symmetrical. Writing it in a sentence, saying it was, and
So we need to
have
make sure we add an
We are-
extra practice to that.
where they're saying it and writing it.
So, yeah, so the anchor charts are gonna be,
Yeah.
I made an anchor chart for the cognates, that I can put in, I'll put it in, I'll take a picture
Yeah,
of,
then it's-
because I think it's better to create it and then put it in the folder, but just using, like we did with the geometric figures, you know, so English to Spanish, so difference, diferencia, repeat, repetir, you know, and we can add to it, but you don't want to overwhelm as you go. But there are a lot of numero, you know, figure, figuras, so, I mean, that's going to help with what we're talking about here, is just
start.
the sentence
Are we gonna
frames
start
and the
framing?
cognates.
Let's start framing.
Are we good with this concept sequence?
Yeah.
Thank
Okay,
you,
so what
Andrea.
day is this thing where?
Are you storing those in one particular place, or are
I
they
put
put
them
in the units?
These resources, you
We just
can
need to
find
ask
it
when
within
everyone's
the
gonna finish
unit
their
guide
test.
under,
Okay.
I created a resources
finished
folder.
Thursday.
But I'll take a picture of
So we're
this
starting
one.
Friday?
I want
Yeah,
to steal
Friday's
them
the
for
need to
first
draw
grade.
Can we say
Oh,
Thursday,
sure.
everybody's finishing
Yeah,
their
that's-
tests?
Yeah.
Was that the day that you guys picked, was Thursday, that everybody was finishing their tests?
So the unit will start Friday?
Is
You mean
everybody?
the, this Unit 4 test?
Yeah.
Finish it? Oh,
Thursday.
I gave it today,
so did I.
yeah.
So we have
Will
to,
be-
are we in agreement to start on Thursday or Friday? Which one?
Friday. I'd like to go over on Thursday, talk about it.
Go over the
I'd like to
test.
talk
And I
about
think
the
there's
test
WIDA
on-
tests on Wednesday and
That's
Thursday.
why
That's why we
gave
said
it
Friday.
We're
today.
gonna have whole group WIDA test starting again.
Yeah, so Friday it sounds
Because
good.
we're really behind.
Before we begin, can we talk about our spiral review? From our last unit test we took, we said that for the spiral review, we wanted to do subtraction.
Right.
Do we still want to start off with our spiral review being subtraction? Subtraction problems, do we still want to do that?
I
Yeah.
would say it wouldn't be a bad idea, certainly.
And
Why didn't we
connecting
talk-
subtraction with near doubles and doubles?
Yeah.
What are we,
Yes,
with
put that
AMC,
in
we're
there,
talking about
definitely.
place value. What were we talking about yesterday?
What with
During
our
AMC
AMC?
meeting.
We haven't-
We were talking about
The assessment.
the AMC, we said
But how we're gonna
how they
move-
were using their doubles and near doubles.
But we're
so-
gonna talk about using like, oh, I forgot now. Should write it down. Never mind. Brain fart.
Other review from this test, maybe have them write a sentence practicing their writing, like put
Yeah.
a shape on the board and say, write what you know about this shape.
Or more, you know,
Because that was hard.
could be specific questions as to,
I'd ask
you know,
for
corners,
sentences.
sides,
Yes, like
Texas faces or something.
complete
A
sentences.
complete, I think that's the key word, complete sentence. And we might even want to say use sentence stems from previous unit that we had.
We need to spend on grading of that test. It's gonna be so.
And even with like the subtraction, we can also look at it in like the word problem form because they've been practicing
Yeah, I was going to say
subtraction.
that is more, not so much just giving them problems, but even like the table that you created.
The four-step plan.
Yeah, doing that again. So it's combining, once again, reading a table, reading a problem, and then having to, and then we were doing, they weren't just doing two-digit, like they weren't just doing 3 plus 2, it was 3 digits that they were adding together. So I think, you know,
I think that that's a lot for review, so we need to, you need to say maybe do 2 at a time, because if you're going to do a word problem, you want it to be a good juicy word problem that you guys can discuss.
Okay.
And that might take your whole review time right there. So I would say to either do a few quick subtraction problems dealing with near doubles and the sentence fraction, or do a good word problem so that you can really discuss how to solve it.
okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. So what would be our instructional goal for the first day? Because our objective is 2.2, Sonia.
Thank you.
2.20,
Recognize.
sorry.
Are we going to give a pre-assessment of any kind?
I think it's going to be like
We said it was
informal.
going to be formative.
Informal,
with the
yeah.
First activity
Okay.
with the manipulatives, and that it would be a formative.
Maybe
assessment.
recognize a repeating pattern.
Recognize.
Right.
Just recognize a repeating pattern using sounds and physical.
Yeah.
Recognize,
Oops, we're almost out of time, or we're out?
Yeah, we have
Yeah.
3 minutes. So when will you come back together to continue framing this unit?
You want to do it tomorrow like we normally,
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
you want to do that?
Tomorrow.
Yeah, we'll do it.
Because you guys don't have your meeting tomorrow,
Yes.
so.
using sound and physical manifestations, our new word that we love.
I was going to say patterns.
And I
It would also be a good connection if you talk to Jane and see what Jane is doing with them in music, to connect with what she's
Art
doing
too.
with her. And art too, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it sounds like tomorrow it should be pretty simple because you all have good ideas from the books, the resources.
You're pretty
so
much
it should be
plug in,
pretty
yeah.
Simple to plug in.
Plus, we got the calendar here, too.
And
So
when do you-
when we come back next,
Thursday.
we'll have this
Framed
all
out.
framed out.
We have framed out, yes.
Okay,
And
that's
then
the
do you
goal.
want to do the data next Thursday
On the test.
for the
Yeah.
test?
Okay. Sounds good.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks, guys.
Right. I will. Trust me, I'm going to get it in there.
I was